Well, good morning, good afternoon, everybody. Welcome to another exciting Exploring by the Seat of Your Pants broadcast with us here. My name is Jesse, and if you're joining us for the first time, like some of our audience are today, then we are all about bringing conservation, adventure, and science into classrooms around the world. Now, today is particularly exciting and kind of bittersweet because we are wrapping up our epic Changing Planet 3 series in collaboration with our friends at Environment and Climate Change Canada. Now, we've been featuring their scientists and storytellers all year long. In fact, as you can tell from Changing Planet Series number 3, it went so well the first two times, we just had to bring them back for another coup de grace final series to wrap up the school year with you. So a big thank you to the entire Environment Canada team for joining us. And extra specially, we are bringing back our first speaker from our first series back for this one, and the only person I didn't get to host in the whole series. This is particularly fitting that we get to bring on Emma Pascoe today in just a minute to blow our minds with wildlife warriors and what we're doing with the Species at Risk Act to help protect Canada's incredible wildlife. By complete fluke, we actually just had a program with Parks Canada like 5 minutes ago talking about the Species at Risk Act. So it's really exciting that we get to do sort of a back-to-back doubleheader on this really important topic. And if you want to check out that program and the rest of our Changing Planet 3 series, head to our YouTube channel. Everything is there for like ever. You can go back like 8 years and see like 3,500 broadcasts. So lots of room for exploration and discovery. Now, without further ado, I'm so excited to welcome in Emma. Thank you so much for joining us again. So nice to have you back, and welcome to the broadcast.
Hi, guys. Nice to be here. Nice to see you.
It is so nice to have you here and to see you. We've talked about frogs, we've talked about birds, we talked about making parks for animals yesterday with Olaf. It's been such a fun series, and I know you have a lot to share with us. So I'm almost done talking. If you want to dive us in with the presentation and pull that up, we are good to go.
Okay, let's see if I can do this share screen thing with the caveat that I'm a biologist, not a computer scientist. Okay.
For what it's worth, we have astronauts and NASA engineers that often have trouble with screen sharing. The pandemic tried to help us by giving us all the Masterville video powers, but yet still it is a little tricky sometimes. So we're mostly good. We're almost there. We'll go full screen and we will be golden. So just do that display setting, swap presenter view again, and then we'll be cooking with gas. Emma, we're golden.
Hooray!
Done. Enjoy.
Okay, thank you so much. Thanks so much, Jesse. Hi, everybody. I'm really excited to be back here with Exploring by the Seat of Your Pants. I think this is such a great program, and I'm really excited to talk to you guys today. And my presentation is going to be talking about, I hear you've heard about frogs and you've heard about birds. So I'm going to be talking to you about all of the species together across the whole country, and some of the ways that my job works to protect them and how you guys can help. So like Jesse said, I'm Emma. I work for the Government of Canada in the Environment and Climate Change Department, and I love going for a walk in the forest or along the coast and getting excited about what I see. And I'm really lucky that I get to make this my whole entire job, which is really cool. These are some of the places that I've lived in the past. Up top there is Victoria, BC. At the bottom there is the Ottawa River, where I'm now living. It's just really great and exciting to get to take my love of nature into a whole career. So the first thing that I want to talk to you guys about is making sure that we're all on the same page of when I say a species at risk. So what is that? So a species is the scientific way of talking about any plant or animal, fungus, bacteria, et cetera, et cetera. A species at risk is kind of best defined by getting you guys to take a look at these two pictures up on my screen. Tell me, what do you think the difference is between them? I guess think it in your head, since I'm not actually standing in front of you guys right now. Okay, so the main difference that I want you guys to, I guess, make sure is clear is that only one of these species is still here. We don't see dinosaurs when we go out for a walk in our backyards. They have gone extinct. They are no longer on the planet. Now, we know that that wasn't caused by humans because there weren't any humans living at the time of dinosaurs. There's, the asteroid and all that. That's not quite what my job focuses on. We look at species that are at risk of becoming extinct because of things that humans can do to an ecosystem. So the next definition that we need to make sure that we get straight is, what is an ecosystem? So I'm going to keep coming back and back and back to the same message here, that all species play a part in the ecosystem. So an ecosystem is basically a fancy way of saying how all of the things in the natural world come together. So you see this picture here of a woodland ecosystem not too far from where I live. We've got trees, we've got a lake, we've got dead leaves, we've got a duck, we've probably got some fish in the background. All of these living and non-living things come together to make an ecosystem. And ecosystem scientists like me are interested in more than just the individual creatures. We want the whole system to be as healthy as possible. And that usually means making sure that as many species as possible are left to their own devices to be able to thrive. So we've learned what a species is, we've learned what an ecosystem is. Now I want to dive in to talking about Canada's species at risk. And I'd like to do that by rolling out the red carpet and introducing you guys to some of our celebrities. So what do we think of when we hear species at risk in Canada? Take a second and get a couple of pictures in your mind of, somebody said, hey, what's a species that's in danger in Canada? What would you think of? Let's see if the couple that I bring up to the forefront are the same ones that you thought of. So the first one that to me immediately springs to mind, even in my 5 years working for Environment and Climate Change Canada, when someone says what's a species at risk in Canada, I always think of the polar bear. They're cute, they're fluffy, they're also vicious predators. They've got it all. They are sort of the poster child for what climate change is doing to the species up in the Arctic because they are so affected by the lack of sea ice and the changing climate. So they are definitely on our list. That is something that Environment and Climate Change Canada is working on. Polar bears are listed as special concern, which means that they're not quite as in danger as the dinosaurs, but we're still keeping an eye on them and their populations and how we can help. Okay, I'm going to bring up another one. And it's the orca. That's another, I would say, big, flashy species that we've, I think you would be hard-pressed to find somebody who's never heard of our orcas or our killer whales. We have a whole bunch of different types of orcas, transient populations that migrate up along our coast and through the Salish Sea. We have some residents who actually do hang out around, Vancouver Island all year long. And these really sensitive, they're predators, but they're really sensitive to all kinds of human activities, boats, noise pollution. If it's too noisy, they have trouble. And so we're really keeping a very careful, close eye on our orcas. So it's really easy to care about these species, I think. I mean, I care about them. They're majestic and they're beautiful. Some of them are just really cute. I've got an owl and a butterfly up on here, the gorgeous monarch butterfly and this adorable little saw-whet owl. If these guys weren't here, I think we would all agree that we'd feel pretty sad. Part of my job as a species at risk biologist is taking care of the species that aren't as fuzzy and as cute as these guys. So I want to introduce you guys to some of our less famous celebrities. Maybe see if I can get you excited about these guys too, because if remembering back to that point that I told you I'm going to come back to again and again, all species play a role in the ecosystem. So if one wasn't there, even if it's not cute and fuzzy and majestic and fluffy, it's going to cause problems. Maybe an animal won't have something to eat or somewhere to live. So the first slightly less famous celebrity that I'm going to introduce you to is a classic Hollywood villain. It's the snake. We've got a whole bunch of snakes on our species at risk list. I know they seem a little bit scary, but they are really beautiful and majestic creatures. They eat critters like mice and rats that we would consider pests. You guys might not think about a snake having things in common with a bird or having, like a nest like they would, but they actually do have their own places that they like to be cozy. They're called hibernaculas, which sort of sounds like the word hibernation. Which is when we talk about a critter basically taking a long nap. So snakes have their own their own hibernaculas, their dens, where they all hang out and get cozy together, which I think is quite nice. So this is an eastern fox snake and an eastern hognose snake, and they're two of the I think really cool critters that are also on our species at risk list. So these guys aren't the ones who are endangered, but this is how I want to introduce you to our next couple of slightly less famous celebrities. What does a bungee jumper and an engineer possibly have in common? The answer is, to me, I associate them both with woodpeckers, because woodpeckers don't just bore into trees looking to dig out bugs the way you might imagine them. They've also got these really cool, clever strategies to find their food. So red-headed woodpeckers do something called fly catching, which to me kind of feels like a bungee jumper. They're able to see a bug, flip past them in the air, and they're able to fly catch, as the word suggests, they're able to jump up on the fly, snag that bird right out of the midair, which is really cool. Williamson sapsuckers have this strategy that to me makes me think of them as like little mini engineers. They don't just bore, you've got this picture of them here making holes in trees, but they're not doing the simple step of just digging the bug out once they've made that hole. They actually choose trees that have high sap content, and they let the sap ooze out and let that sticky, sugary stuff trap the insects, and then they eat the insects off of that. So to me, that's kind of a step above just they're doing a dig, and they're problem solving a puzzle. So I think they're also really cool. Not only do we have snakes and birds and whales, bears on our list, we even have plants on the species at risk list. So these guys here are, I guess they're in the same kingdom as plants, but they're technically not even considered, biologically speaking, they're different from, a plant that would grow in your garden. You can find these mosses and lichens. Picture if you're going on a walk in the forest and everything's, kind of green and fuzzy. That's your mosses and lichens at work. And they are, lichen in particular, I think are really cool because remember how I mentioned fungi earlier? Lichen are an organism that is a combination basically of a plant cell, an algae cell, and a fungus. And they're living and working together as one creature, which I think is really neat. And they're really important because they're able to tell us when our air is clean because of the way that they grow and the types of environments that they're able to live in. These guys are, they're a little bit more hidden. There aren't necessarily as many picture books about them. But there are also species that me and my coworkers pay attention to, and they're on our at-risk list in Canada. So coming back to this slide again, here's another type of ecosystem. This one's an alpine forest ecosystem. All species are playing a part in all of these ecosystems. It's really important that they're all there. It helps us and it helps them. And there are a lot of things that are happening in the world lately that's kind of making this difficult. So what do we do about it? This is kind of the halfway point of my presentation. I never want to leave you guys on, a bummer note, because we're doing a lot. So in Canada, we have the Species at Risk Act. It's a law. We call it SARA for short, which is kind of nice. I'm sure maybe some of you in this class listening right now are named Sarah. You can think of this as your own personal law. SARA is a law. It was designed to help plants and animals who are struggling. And that means that people who hurt one of these species at risk can get into trouble. The way that this works, there's a ton of people who work for Environment Canada to make sure the Species at Risk Act is kind of put into place. So this is where part of where I come in. My job at Environment and Climate Change Canada is a species at risk biologist. I wish I was out in the field a little bit more often. That's a picture of me at a national park. Where you can usually find me is right here at my desk with my emails and my trusty owl Bernard over there, and recovery documents. So what a recovery document is, when a species gets added to the Species at Risk Act list, we have to put together a recovery document that talks about what is that species, how does it live, what's threatening it to make it go extinct, and what is it that we can do about it. So let's break down those questions. How does a species become at risk? This is the first question that we ask ourselves when we put together these recovery documents. We want to know what's threatening this species. We have this whole way of categorizing these threats. There's an international number system. There's specialists. It's a whole operation. But there are, some basic principles that we follow when we're doing this analysis. One is that the species habitat isn't there anymore. So that's a threat that we would call, let me flip that. Logging and wood harvesting is an example of that type of a threat. So if a species lives in trees and the trees are being taken down, its habitat isn't there anymore. And that's, a pretty clear indication for us for why it's going at risk. Another indication is that maybe its habitat is still there, but there's something in its habitat that's making it sick. So I've got this yucky picture of all this sewage here that if it's, not being filtered correctly, if a critter's living in those waters, it's going to become really sick. A critter could be living in, a pristine environment that's all there. But there's another really interesting threat that has a lot of research going into it lately, and that's invasive species. So what happens here is when people move, whoops, I've skipped ahead, you guys. I'll finish this bit and then we'll get on to what we do next. If people either on purpose or by accident move a creature from its normal habitat to a new one, suddenly none of the creatures in this new habitat where our invasive species have moved to are used to running away from this predator. And this new species acts like a major predator and it's able to, gobble everything up. So this is the Asian carp. That's a really classic example from a lot of Canadian waterways. So I've given you the little sneak preview because the next bit that I want to talk about is once me and my scientist coworkers have come up with ideas for what is threatening this species, the next thing that we need to do is figure out what are we going to do about it. There are a lot of ways to do this. One of the ways, and it sounds like one of my coworkers gave a presentation yesterday about national parks. So these are places where the species habitats are protected so that, they can't be cut down or removed and they can't have substances put in them that make them sick. I've got a little picture of a road here because a really cool area of research is connecting these habitats. So think about all the different places that make your habitat important to you. You've got your house, you've got your school, you've also got your grocery store, maybe you've got your grandparents' house. You need a way to get to all of these different places. My guess is that you probably do it by driving, maybe biking or walking or taking public transportation. And so that's the kind of thing that we need to, as ecosystem scientists, make sure are there for all of our species at risk. We need to make sure that they're able to get from their nesting grounds to foraging grounds so that they can eat. So that's something really cool that we work on. We work on removing invasive species. This plant is called Phragmites. It grows a lot in Ontario in wetlands, and it's really making it hard for the species who normally live there to be there. I think I've got a picture here of my coworker holding a little frog in a bag. We also spend a lot of time checking up on these animals, and I've got a few more pictures of that in the next slide, because once we've figured out what's threatening a species and made some recommendations, the next thing that we need to do is make sure that we're keeping track of how the ecosystem is doing. So that's me holding a bird there. Disclosure, I wasn't actually doing this as part of my job. It's a volunteer gig that I have on the weekends. It's an activity called bird banding, where we can basically give the birds a little bracelet with a number, and then we can see where they go when they migrate, which is pretty cool. We can count different species of plants that are in an area. Here's a couple of my coworkers hanging out with turtles. There are other species on our at-risk act. Ooh, tongue twister. And basically, it's important once these recommendations have been made that we keep coming back and monitoring and researching to find out how many of the species there are and how they're doing. Does this work? The answer is yes. There are lots of conservation success stories. I've put a couple of famous ones up on this slide. There are the swift foxes that have been really successfully reintroduced to prairie environments. Mottled dusky wings are a beautiful species of butterfly that even just in the past couple of years, the work that people have, and the ecosystem scientists and insect biologists have been doing to help these butterflies come back into their natural habitat is really inspiring. So this kind of stuff works. Going back to my theme of this presentation about how all species play a part in the ecosystem, I want you guys to remember that you are also a part of the ecosystem, and there are things that you can do to help your favorite species at risk. The first thing is learning more about them. So this, what I've got up here is a couple of different pictures of reports on these species. They're a little dry and boring. You can find them on the Government of Canada Species at Risk Public Registry. I've got a little screenshot of that there. They're a little dry and boring. I know I write them for a living, so maybe it's not so cool that I'm saying this on the internet. But if you visit your local library, I bet that you're going to find a ton of books that have amazing pictures and really cool stories about creatures that you can even just find in your own backyard. You can join a community science event. I can send this link to your teachers, and all of those things that you saw pictures of me and my coworkers doing, looking for frogs and counting plants. These are all things that community members can get involved with. And so this is a really amazing way. If you feel like you might be interested in getting involved in some science, this is a really cool way to do it. And even just taking a walk in your own neighborhood and bringing your phone is a way to help species at risk. So there are these neat apps. There's one called iNaturalist. And the way it works, I've taken this picture of this duck here. This is a wood duck. I think that they're just absolutely gorgeous. They have these beautiful markings on their face and on their bodies. And so what you can do with these different apps, Seek is another one, like seeking. And you can take a picture of creatures that you see and upload it to the app. And then that tells the scientists where these critters are. And it helps us kind of keep track of how they're doing better. And finally, there's small everyday actions that everybody can do that makes the environment a more healthy place. There's recycling, there's focusing on using less plastic. Keeping your cat inside is a big one. Cats eating birds. You might think that it's only one or two, but there have actually been some studies done that show that, and there are kind of enough cats across Canada that when they do eat a bird, it is really affecting the bird population. So that's my family cat, and she is strictly forbidden from eating birds. She's very fluffy, so she's doing fine. So any of these small everyday actions that you can do on your own are going to help make the environment a more healthy place. So I will conclude this presentation by reminding everyone again that all species play a part in the ecosystem. It's really important that we take care of all of them. I've got, I saved my favorite for last. This is an ocean ecosystem. I started out as a marine biologist, even though I mostly work on land-based creatures now. And I've left it up here because I think that the ocean, it's so mysterious, right? Because we can't see what's going on under there. We have to do a lot more work to kind of uncover it. So I've left it up as my last slide, because what I want to leave you guys with, the thought is that there is just so much more that we have to learn about species at risk in Canada and all over the world. And I'm really looking forward to seeing what this new generation of scientists starts cooking up.
Emma, what a spectacular program. Thank you so much. If I knew nothing else about you than that you celebrated a wood duck, talked about iNaturalist, and just everything about it. It was so fun. Thank you beyond measure for that. If you want to come out of screen share so you can see us again, have a bit of a conversation, that would be awesome. As more of this class, if you guys want to chime in the chat, please do. And YouTubers, it looks like you already have some questions coming in, which is awesome. So thank you so much for that. Our Stratford crew wants to know, how many at-risk species are there in Canada? This might be a bit of a tricky one, actually, but do you know offhand where we're at?
It is a tricky one. It's pretty high. So, this is tough. My memory off the top of my head is that if you go on that website I was showing you, that Sarah Public Registry, you're going to find a couple of hundred on there. So maybe 600-700. And these range from, there's the orcas, there's the bears, but these are also the mosses and the lichens. We look at every single possible species that we can find in an ecosystem, and we even make sure that we're separating out different species of, we've got different species of bugs on there. There's different types of beetles, different populations of species. We refer to them as designatable units. So, some of them might be in Saskatchewan and some of them might be on the other side of the Rockies. So with all of those, all added up together, I think we've got about 600 or 700 on there. But if somebody wants to go do their homework and take a look and report back to us, that would be awesome.
I'll try and find it as we do the broadcast. I can pretty much check that out. So, it's a little disheartening, as you said. It's sort of stressful to think that there are so many things that are at risk. But I want to note for people, we now have a green species list. It's sort of internationally, which is species that have been brought back from the brink. So we are working so hard, not just in Canada, but around the world, to try and get species off that endangered species list, get them off those at-risk lists of species. And in many cases, we've done a really, really good job. Whether it's cranes, wolves, whales, there are numerous examples of species and groups where our actions have made a really positive difference. So it can be a little distressing to look at a big list that's that big, but I'm really glad we got that question to kick us off. And Emma, I want to highlight something because I so seldom get the chance to talk about lichens, and they're so cool. If you go to central Antarctica, like in the middle of nowhere near the bottom of the world, and you crack open rocks, there are lichens inside those rocks. And that's insane. Like, they're such a cool group of creatures, organisms, and
they actually call them the coral reefs of the forest.
We could talk all day. This is very fun already. Okay. HAC, Ms. Moffat's group, please do feel free to chime in the StreamYard chat. We'd love to hear from you. YouTubers, keep them coming. Emma, actually, one of our next questions is on that level of optimism. You seem very chipper about all this. How do you maintain that positive spirit when it comes to species at risk?
Oh, that's a good question. I think that we all do it just for the, like, me and my coworkers, we do this for the love of the environment. We're all just so happy being outdoors. And, we read all these stories of all of this destruction. And there are a lot of places that you go where you can see it. But if you go, there are also a lot of places that are still, pristine and beautiful. We've got all of our national parks, our national wildlife areas in Canada, and spending time outside with these creatures, even if, it's just a couple of them, reminds me that, we're working hard because there are still a lot more of them here, and they're beautiful and they're fascinating. And just every time I get to see them and see pictures of them, it makes me happy, and it reminds me why I'm doing this.
That's a beautiful answer. And it's something that speaks to pretty much every conservationist that we have that comes on. Going out in nature, seeing that wildlife, whether it's plants, animals, whatever, lichen, really does make such a huge positive difference in your mood, in your day. It makes you want to preserve it. It's really hard to want to care for something if you don't have some experience of it. It's why some zoos and aquaria do such a nice job of that, national park system. So you segued me perfectly into our next question, which is, do you have a favorite national park that you visited? No pressure at all.
Oh my God. Ooh, I'll list a couple of them. So I've been a little bit all over. I grew up in Toronto. There's actually a new urban park there since I moved away from Toronto, the Rouge Urban Park, which is really cool. I spent some time living in Kingston when I was at university in Queens. There were some parks near there that I like to visit. And then while I was in university, I went out to the Bay of Fundy and did a course basically where we learned how to study the tide pool creatures in the Bay of Fundy. And the Bay of Fundy, some of you might know, is famous because it has the highest tides. The tides change levels the most rapidly. So that's been pretty amazing to see. And then I spent a couple of years living out in Victoria in BC. And oh my goodness, those beautiful, the forests next to the ocean. It's Pacific Rim National Park, I think that's the national park there. It's just something else. So there's all over the country. I love living in Canada. There are just so many amazing things that we can see.
We are in a pretty special place here, and it's huge too. There's so many diverse ecosystems, and that's one of the things that makes it so special. So I'm in Newfoundland's west coast. My national park is Gross Moor, which is stunning, right up there with Banff and Pacific Rim. It's surely one of the most beautiful in the country. But where I am closer to Morocco. Like, it is faster for me if I were to go in a straight line to cross the Atlantic Ocean to Africa than it is to go to Pacific Rim National Park. So we are huge. And what the ecosystems we have in the mountains, in the prairies in Saskatchewan, in the north in Nunavut, we've been featuring a lot of these in our Parks Canada series right now, but we're in such a special place. So if you can take the chance to explore Canada, wherever you may go, you'd be amazed at what you can find. Thank you for all those very diverse experiences. I mean, that's a very cool way of answering that question. For a question on that note, actually, so how would you recommend someone get your job? You highlighted a little bit of your own personal role, but if someone wanted to be you in the future, is there courses they should take? Is there something that they should do? Is it just use dye naturalist all the time? What would you recommend?
Question. Uh, well, so I told you about the universities that I went to. So I did a degree in environmental science and biology when I was right after high school. And then I really thought that I wanted to be a marine biologist. I still kind of think of myself as a marine biologist. I went out and did a master's, like a research program studying Pacific herring in the Salish Sea. And it was really, really cool and really fascinating. But I discovered that I get really seasick. So I was on a research ship circling Vancouver Island, thinking, oh no, I can't keep doing this for the rest of my life. So I did some exploring, and I thought, the part that I really love about nature and what makes me feel good is when I can help translate all the science that my scientist coworkers are doing into kind of on the ground policy, things that we can tell Canadians, like these are the ways that you can do these things in order to make a difference. So I drifted, rather than from going to become like a deep sea diver and maybe a doctor. I started looking into working at the government, and it's been a great fit. I'm super happy here. Yeah.
Yeah. By the way, I want to stress, I'm not being paid by the government to say this, but when we have Environment Canada on and Parks Canada people on, like universally, it's like the people who love their job more than anyone I've ever had the chance to work with. So if you do grow up and you want to follow in Emma's footsteps, pretty much I think 100% of the people we brought on in our history just absolutely adore getting the chance to explore, showcase, learn about these incredible places coast to coast to coast. We're in a special country, and we're lucky to have that as our setup for government conservation. So thank you for that, Emma. It's fantastic. And thanks to our class, our Ms. Moffat's group. You guys have to go. That's totally cool. So have fun. Thank you so much for listening along. We'll continue to take YouTube questions for the next few minutes. Time flies and you're having fun in these broadcasts. Ms. Quirk's class wants to know a great question. We had this in our last program too. How do scientists determine what makes a species at risk?
Ooh, this is a fun one. Okay, so there's a lot of research that goes into it. The way that we do this with the government is we have, we call them an arm's length body. It's a group of scientists that don't directly work for the government, but they're, they've chosen to come together and form this group. Their acronym is COSEWIC. That's COSEWIC, and I believe this is a quiz. It stands for the Committee on the Status of Endangered Wildlife in Canada. And they're groups of scientists who get together by different, we call them taxa. A taxa is a way of classifying like a category of animals. So there's a mammals group, there's a birds group, there's a reptiles group, and they meet every year and they read reports of going back far into the history, how, if we're talking about birds, that's a really easy one to talk about because there's been such a long history of bird research using these banding and observation stations where you can put a little bracelet on the bird and kind of see where it's going. We can track, this is about how many we estimate are in the population this year. Oh no, 10 years ago, there were even more. So this is, looking at the past to kind of understand the present is really how we do a lot of this. And so this COSEWIC group gets together and they recommend species to be listed. So they give the government their report. So we take that information directly from the scientists. And then it's up to the Minister of Environment and Climate Change Canada to take the recommendations from all of their staff and declare that a species has been added to the Species at Risk Act, or the SARA. We call it a schedule, not a list. I'm actually not sure why. I think it's just a fancy term. So it's this sort of cooperation where we first hear the information from this arm's length body of scientists, and then only after that does it go to the government.
Geez, that was a very thoughtful and thorough answer. Thank you so much for that, Emma. There is a question I'm going to do a sidebar on in just a second in this, but I found an answer to how many species at risk in Canada. So the latest data that I can find from federal government Canadian things is 2,253 at some risk of endangerment, extinction, vulnerability, which is really high.
Oh my goodness, I was way off at my 700 guess. Nobody told
You
my
know what?
boss.
It was really funny. There were like 18 different sites that I was doing in the back end. That's why I took a second to come back in, and that's the best data that I can find. Some of those are like vulnerable, so or near threatened, but that's a lot of species, and it sort of underscores the importance of the work that Emma, her team, Environment Climate Change Canada do. So I'm really glad we got that question to kick off the program. On the note of, okay, so we were setting the recommendations ultimately, but we're taking it from these teams of scientists. It's a question we had in our last broadcast, and I actually wanted to bring it back to harp on it. How do we count the creatures? Like if you've got something like an orca, it's a pretty huge animal. You're like, there's an orca. We just talked about butterflies in our parks program a minute ago. And it's like, how do you know how many butterflies there are?
Butterflies are a really hard one. So it's different for every species. Some of them are easy to see. Some of them not so much. Some of them we have to do some basically calculated guesswork. That's a whole entire field of statistical modeling, ecosystem modeling. And if anybody is really good at math and they're wondering where to take their math skills, biologists these days really need good mathematicians. Because some of what we do is we'll pick a small area that we consider representative of a bigger area, and then we make sure, using very rigorous scientific principles and mathematic principles, that we count everything in that little area and then sort of consider it representative of a larger one. So that's a way that we do things if it's really hard to tell where the species is. For larger species that cover huge areas, something that a new area of research that people are really getting interested in is drones that you can fly up and take pictures of. We use satellite imagery. A lot of ocean biologists use satellite imagery to look at algae, big algae blooms that you can see from space. It's pretty amazing. Birds, I think I told you about. There's the banding system that goes back like over 100 years, which is pretty amazing. See if I can think of any other ones off the top of my head. Yeah, it's tricky. This is sort of the question. And this is where these cool apps like iNaturalist and Seek and eBird all come into play, because you guys, if you're taking a walk outside in your neighborhood and you start listening for birds or looking for bugs, chances are you're going to see some things that are going to help out the scientists. So I would love if people get on that.
We've been featuring this in a bunch of our broadcasts, not just this month, but generally in May. We've got our Backyard Bio campaign. So we've got kids going out using Seek and iNaturalist. They're amazing tools. It's quite amazing to be like, what is that weird fungus? You take a picture of it, and like an international community of people will help you figure out what that picture is or what that organism is.
It's magic. I absolutely think it's magic.
Professional detachment out the window. This is such a fun program. I love it. Emma, this has been a hoot, truly. Thank you so much for your time, expertise today. Again, I'm really kind of sad that we're wrapping up our Changing Planet 3 series, but I encourage all our classes, head to our YouTube channel, check out the 4 broadcasts. It's been so much fun. Is there any final message you want to leave with our kids today? Anything to take home with about saving species, your work to wrap up the broadcast today?
Yeah, I would again go back to that key message of all species play a part in the ecosystem. They might not be big, they might not be flashy, they might not be fluffy, but everything that's in our ecosystems is working together in this beautiful, just fine-tuned process. And the best thing that we can do is just live our lives in respect of that. And know that we're kind of all part of something bigger.
Emma, there's no better message than that to wrap up a conservation broadcast. Thank you so much for your time, your passion, your expertise, all of it. Couldn't have a better end to our Changing Planet 3 series. And I'll say a big farewell to our live classes, YouTube classes, people watching 3 weeks next Tuesday. Thank you all so much for being here today.